All right, we're back. Welcome back to Rare Elvis Photos here on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, um, Instagram, I guess. I got that as well, although I still haven't gotten to posting everything on each channel. A little more active on Facebook, a little more active on TikTok, but YouTube is my main channel, and y'all know that, okay? But y'all can go over there and subscribe if you'd like or follow. We started reading this book right here. See if y'all can see it. All right, there we go. Good rocking tonight. Some pretty cool stuff we've been reading about in here. Some stuff that maybe we didn't know as much about. And so we're going to read some more. And I don't. Oh yeah, that's why. I was thinking, why isn't there a bookmark? Because we're on chapter 2. We're going to start chapter 2. Not a big fan of Joe Esposito. First off, didn't know the guy. None of us really knew the guy for the most part. But we know that he was kind of Colonel's employee. And I've heard that he got let go by Elvis, though I don't know whether that's true or not. Always love seeing your comments to see what y'all have to say about that. Maybe sources that you heard it in. But I've already read some inaccuracies so far, but I've also read some stuff that's pretty cool. That's some stuff that maybe we hadn't heard before. And that's the point of maybe reading some of these books. All these books that are up here, we're going to be reading, okay? We're always wanting to hear something we haven't heard before. So, without further ado, let's get started. Chapter 2, Parisian Nights. Now, football's team play, body contact, and release of energy help guys get to know each other quickly. Elvis and I really hit it off the next time we met, at his Sunday afternoon tag football game in a little park near his house. Now, after that day, I became part of the group that gathered almost nightly in Elvis's living room. Also, every Sunday afternoon on the soccer field. It included Elvis's Memphis buddies and new Army friends like Rex Mansfield and Charlie Hodge, my roommate George, and another Army buddy, Billy Green. And I've got to say, also Johnny Lyin. Okay, I'm going to include that, even if Joe's not including that. Okay. We played football, joked around, and flirted with girls. Except to duck into the movies at another base, we rarely went out, and we never ate out with Elvis because he was a very particular eater. Strictly meat and potatoes, and everything had to be well done to the point of being charred. I like stuff pretty dang burned too. By the way, as we're getting into this diet, how y'all doing on your diets that have been, I've hit a couple days where like yesterday I woke up and I was maybe 0.2 pounds lighter, and I hardly ate anything. I think I had coffee for breakfast. I had a bowl of fruit, and then I had a piece of whitefish for dinner and a granola bar. And I didn't lose much. Didn't lose anything hardly at all. Then yesterday was a slight cheat day. Okay, I did have a salad, which is fine, healthy salad, with tuna in it. But before that, I had some spicy noodles. This morning, I woke up about 0.2 pounds heavier than I was the day before. So two days, no weight loss. It's okay. It's okay. Sometimes we maintain. It's a long-term thing. So if y'all don't be discouraged. And weigh yourself in the morning every day. Don't weigh yourself throughout the days. It's psychological. Okay, back to the book. I had to talk about it because the whole idea of charring the food and eating. He refused to eat seafood because he'd never had it when he was young, and he loved to pick from everyone else's food. But God help you if you wanted something from his plate. He hated anyone touching his food. He once told me because when he was small, his cousins would come over and eat his food, and he'd leave the table hungry. As I remember Elvis today and try to understand him, I realize how much his early life had shaped him, down to his eccentric eating habits. Elvis had been poor but overprotected and, as an only child, very lonely. His mother made sure her son was well raised according to strong Christian ethics. The facts of his early life explain much about the man he became: his giddy, almost hedonistic enjoyment of material riches, and his extravagant gifts to those who were as poor as he had been, his unfailing courtesy to everyone, regardless of wealth or class, his need to be surrounded by old friends with whom he felt comfortable, and his avoidance of powerful people and self-styled intellectuals. Man, I can't stand when they go around thinking that they're better than someone else because they went to better schools or had more money or read the latest book, he once told me. Yet Elvis's withdrawn childhood personality masked a secret yearning for the limelight and for constant attention and approval. I love to get people excited. I don't know where I get it, where I got it. I don't know how long I'm going to have it, but as long as I do, I want to spread it around because people need excitement, and I can give it to them. Elvis was crazy about a TV show at the time called Millionaire, or The Millionaire. Anybody seen that show or remember? I don't even know what it is, The Millionaire. I know Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but that's 40 years after Elvis. Each week, an ordinary person with a problem answered a knock at his door to find a messenger in a suit who announced that he was presenting the person with $1 million from an anonymous donor. The only string was that the recipient couldn't reveal the source of his sudden wealth. Naturally, every week the poor clod blew it by blabbing to someone. That show struck a chord in Elvis. It doesn't take much to change someone's life, Elvis said, then related some of his own shock treatments. One incident in particular stands out in memory. You see, one day we're walking down a street in Beverly Hills, and I started handing out $100 bills to total strangers, Elvis said. No questions, I just handed out the bill. They looked up and recognized me, and in a few moments a crowd had formed. Each time we had to hightail it out before a riot broke out, and I got a big kick out of their expressions, though. Man, they were telling their friends and their families about that for weeks, maybe months, but, God, I love those double takes. When I first met him, I thought Elvis was generous because he needed to buy friends. That his bursts of generosity were a way to shake off his loneliness. But now, I think differently. Elvis didn't pass out money just to massage his ego. He got a genuine thrill from making people happy, and he was always a bit amazed at the public's reaction to his presence. He couldn't resist testing it every so often, and Elvis wanted to make a difference in people's lives, especially his fans, to whom he was always grateful. He often said that if it weren't for them, he'd still be driving a truck. You see, Joe, my fans expect me to do things they wish they could do. If they'd had the breaks I have, that is. A lot of my fans have a rough life, and they see me as someone who's lifted from poverty and dropped in a world of glamour and excitement. My job is to share that glamour and excitement with them. When I'm on stage, I want to create excitement. I want each person to feel that I'm performing for him or her. And even when I'm off stage, that show goes on. The clothes I wear, the cars I drive, my style of living, they're all part of what my fans expect from me. Most people get kicked around in life, he continued. They just don't get the breaks, and I love the idea of overwhelming a total stranger with a gift like a new car, just because they happen to be nearby. It's an incredible kick, and no substance can get you as high. It's the same thing I feel when I'm on stage and every eye's on me. I'm giving it all I've got, and they're loving every move, every sound. Man, there's nothing better. Every Sunday, we strolled a few blocks to the football field. I loved the ritual of preparing for the games. We always started the afternoons in the living room, shooting the breeze, and at about 2 o'clock, Elvis would duck into his bedroom and reappear a few moments later, wearing a black sweatshirt. A small white handkerchief tied around his neck added that extra touch of style equivalent to his raised short collars. He was always on the black team because he thought that was the hip color back then. Years later, he came to prefer white because of his spiritual connotations. Now, the sweatshirts were always piled along the entrance hallways next to several duffel bags full of fan mail that arrived daily. Elvis recruited me for his team in that first game. Here, Joe, grab a black shirt. Then we walked to the soccer field that stood in the shadows of the large buildings that housed Bad Nauheim's healing baths. On Sundays, the town's pace had slowed, and the audience for our games never numbered more than 50 people. We got out and got going about 2:30. Elvis played quarterback always, and particularly enjoyed mapping out the plays. Now, one of the players, Billy Green from Philadelphia, was a world-class soccer player who played on the All-Army soccer team in the Pan Am trials. He inspired Elvis to inject a little soccer strategy into our football game that day. Hey, Bill, Elvis said in the huddle. Here's a crazy idea that'll knock him out. You drop back from the line of scrimmage, and I'll toss a short pass off to you. Then you kick it across the field to me as I'm heading down the sideline. It worked. Elvis caught the kick, and he ran, and he ran, and he ran, and he scored for a touchdown. Now, there was a lot of moaning about among the white team, but the guys in the black sweatshirts who were laughing their way up the field insisted that the play counted. Now, whenever Elvis made up the rules, everyone went along, especially if laughs were involved. Now, for the most part, Elvis played seriously. As with everything else, he developed a passion for, however fleeting. Now, he had to be the best, of course, at everything as well. Elvis was a true competitor, and he wanted to be the best football player, and sometimes seemed to think he actually was. Now, this is the stuff I don't like about Joe Esposito, okay? He's a smart ass. Okay, whoops. Says he wasn't a natural athlete, but because he was darn good, and because he played for hours and hours until he found his special talent. First off, I think Elvis was very athletic. Everybody else besides Joe Esposito said that. Wasn't a natural athlete. I think he was. He could throw the ball really well, but he wasn't a runner. Elvis wasn't a great blocker either, because he wasn't stupid, Joe. He's not going to get himself hurt. You don't need to be a great blocker. Whew! But he went in there and got knocked on his butt sometimes and jumped right back up. Well, see what I know? He still tried to do it. But I tell you what, you know those guys weren't going to hit Elvis full hilt because Elvis Presley, even though he was in the army, he was, you weren't going to hurt Elvis. If you hurt Elvis, you would be the most vilified person in the history of the world. But for Joe to say he wasn't a natural athlete, I don't like that. Everyone always made a big deal about every move that Elvis made and was careful not to scratch his face or injure him in any way. After the games, we would go back to the house to drink Cokes and order pizzas. During the week, Elvis performed all the duties expected of any ordinary GI except for one. He never had to endure mail call, which for me was one of the worst aspects of Army life. Everyone gathered around the mail clerk as he read off the names in no particular order. See, you hoped for at least one letter, maybe even a parcel. But as each person received his mail, the crowd gradually dwindled along with your hopes. Finally, if you had no mail that day, you found yourself standing with one or two others, trying to act nonchalant. After the last name was called, the clerk headed back to the mailroom. The losers in the mail call game had to walk past the guys with faces buried in letters from loved ones, while we consoled ourselves with lines like, heck, I wasn't expecting any mail anyways. I haven't been writing, so it's no surprise that I didn't get any mail. An army clerk once told me that Elvis often received more mail in one day than the entire 32nd Armor Unit together. Nearly 1,000 men. Now, I couldn't help but comment that first Sunday on the amazing volume. Yeah, the fans, they really want to help me by keeping in touch, Elvis said. Man, I may not be the best singer in the world, but I sure have the best fans. I hope they remember me after all these months. Man, there's no way I could possibly read all that mail, let alone answer it. I'll read some of the letters, but some are a little weird. I asked what he meant, so he showed me a letter from a fan in Belgium who wrote that Elvis was the Messiah, sent to save the world. Elvis shook his head after I read it. Yeah, man, that's just not the only letter that talks about me being the Messiah. I don't know where they get that stuff. Heck, I'm just a singer who got some breaks. I'm no Messiah. It's weird. I don't know where they get that stuff. Elvis kept that letter, though, and I'm certain he read it more than once. And as I got to know him better, I realized that he did have a sense of being anointed somehow. Like, why me? He constantly asked himself and others. The question would bother him more and more as time passed. Now, I didn't have the answer, not that day, and not now. But like everyone around him, I knew Elvis was special. See, he had an edge, a provocative intensity reminiscent of James Dean. Elvis had that warm, boyish smile, but he wasn't the kind of guy you ran up to and slapped on the back. Sharing his space was like stepping into the eye of a hurricane. He was a core of deceptive calm that retained a charge of electricity because a storm rages just outside and around it. Elvis had just begun to study karate when I met him. He had read something about the martial arts, and Lamar contacted a German instructor named Jürgen Seidel, whom we called George. He gave Elvis lessons at the house, and we all became involved in it to some extent. But Elvis got into it like crazy. Karate made him feel tough, though it was mostly show, and it also gave him self-confidence that he'd lacked as a kid. Oh yeah, I could take a guy down in a minute, he boasted. It felt good to be able to say it. Elvis picked up another of his macho interests, guns, in the Army. See, I don't like Joe Esposito, the way he or this author's phrasing things. It really puts it in a lot of negative connotations, the way it's said. Although my Army records show I had a perfect score with the carbine, it wasn't true. We were both fair to middling shots. There are many rules in the Army, and my job as a clerk in the 27th Auxiliary required me to qualify at firing the carbine. Now, when I was training at Fort Hood, my job called for me to have an M1 rifle, the standard machine for most soldiers at the time. I qualified as a marksman with an M1. One day, in Germany, we got word that all the clerks had to go out to a rifle range and qualify with a carbine. The idea of leaving the office and hunkering down on the cold ground at the rifle range didn't appeal to anyone. But we followed orders, and out we went. I couldn't have cared less whether I hit the target. Amazingly enough, instead of getting a white flag known as Maggie's Drawers, a signal that the shot was a total miss, I got a signal that it was a bullseye. My slugs kept hitting the dust, and the flags from the guys at the target zone kept signaling perfect shots. I guess the guys wanted to do me a favor, so I wound up with a perfect score in my record. I like that. I do like that bit of honesty. It's kind of humor. I kind of thought it was like, this is probably why. On my next visit to Elvis's house, I told him about my perfect carbine score. Well, he was impressed, clearly interested in that and my supposed skill with him. I could see Elvis doing mental calculations about me, the Italian kid from Chicago, who turns out to be good with a weapon. From then on, every so often, Elvis would ask questions about the Mafia. Hey, Joe, do you know one of those Mafia guys from Chicago? He'd ask. Or he'd make comments like, heck, I guess everyone in Chicago must be part of the Mafia. Now that I think about it, I gave Elvis other reasons to link me with the Mafia. My buddy George and I like bragging to Elvis about our gambling adventures. Good filler material between his much more exciting Hollywood stories. See, Elvis also embellished our anecdotes when he repeated them the others. repeated them to others. The difference between what we did and what Elvis said we did was about as great as the difference is about me hitting the dirt halfway to the target and the flag coming up bullseyes. One day, a few of us got to talking about taking someone's life. Elvis took me straight in the eye. Joe, tell me the truth, he said. Could you? It seemed like a strange question coming from a guy wearing a military uniform and serving on foreign soil. Heck yes, I answered. We've been trained to do that. That's our job. I hope all of us are able to do that when the time comes, and I'm ready. Bullshit aside, Elvis said, could you look a guy in the eye and just do that? If that's my job, then that's what I do, I replied. I thought he was talking about military duty, but now I realize that Elvis was asking about a much larger question. I think he was asking a guy from Chicago, whom he suspected of Mafia connections, about how he felt taking someone's life. And the answer he heard was just that it was my job, and if it was my job, I could do it. Just like the Mafia hitman. I'll never know, but I suspect Elvis asked me to work for him partly because he thought about the situation, and if it ever called for it, that I could be cold-blooded. He loved that notion. It fed straight into his hyperactive fantasy life. So I kind of thought that the whole idea of getting a perfect score, that it was Elvis. Elvis had set it up. That's what I was hinting at earlier. But obviously, Joe just he must have had some buddies there, or maybe they just wanted to help him out or something. So back to the book. Let's see. He often asked me about the personal lives of Mafia bosses. He was particularly intrigued by the way they segmented their lives into neat compartments. They have a maid, he said. They have a safe, comfortable life with a respectable wife who takes care of the house and raises the kids. And then they have a wild life with beautiful women, fast cars, and lots of excitement. Man, that's living. This is living full of fun dreams. That makes me think of that. This is living. That's the life for me. I love that song. Kid Galahad, one of my favorite movies. There's probably an air truth to that. I mean, think about it. I mean, this is 1958, 1959, 1960-ish. I know we all like to think of Elvis as innocent. Elvis was a guy, we know he had lots of affairs and women that he loved and a lot of friendships, I think, with women as well. But I think the freedom and flexibility that was part of society back then that a guy should have, you know what I'm saying? Just like, they didn't say nothing about cancer with smoking, and it was cool and it was healthy. And if you did it, you'd be stronger and tougher and live a longer life. It's kind of what society fed everybody back then. So I think we always have to look at it that way when reviewing anybody from the past that's historical. Somebody that people say he got free passes for this, It's not so. It's just you got to understand the times. All right. It says, Elvis was fascinated with the Mafia's code of strict but contradictory ethics, one he would later adopt for himself. He wanted the wife, the kids, the warm security of family life, and the pride of being the head of the household. And when he finally married, he didn't abandon his pursuit of the wild life. All of us would live double lives then. Our wives and children, in one carefully insulated compartment, while we cavorted all about the country with the many women who gathered around Elvis, attracted like gorgeous moths to his flame. Now, at times, Elvis seemed to model his entire lifestyle on the Mafia, modifying it according to reluctant answers to questions. Like, hey Joe, how do you explain how a godfather who thinks it's okay to make lots of money from illegal gambling, prostitution, loan shark, and all that stuff, but it's not okay to deal substances? You're asking me? I usually responded, how do I know what goes through somebody's mind like that? But he kept after me. No bullshit, Joe. You know those guys. Why do they draw the line at making money off of that? Heck, I hear there's lots of money to be made in that field anyways. Well, maybe the difference is that people don't get hurt as much except for broken knees and when dealing with gambling or girls or loans, I offered. Substances can do a lot of damages. Elvis had a dark sense of humor, said Joe. The idea of broken knees struck him as comical. For the moment, he was satisfied with my explanation, but he returned to that subject from time to time. I suspect our conversations helped draw his own boundaries and later create the rationalization for his own substance abuse. Elvis knew that sordid tragedy and humiliation of being part of a family that had suffered from the effects of drinking. Both parental lines were studied with alcoholics, and his mother died of liver disease after a lifetime of heavy drinking. So Joe put it in his book as well. We've heard this about Gladys. And, I mean, did he hear it from somebody else? Is he the one that perpetrated this reality or this thought? The result was that Elvis was as adamant as a teetotaler as a Puritan. The result was that Elvis was as adamant a teetotaler as a Puritan. Even though he later became addicted to substances, in his mind and the minds of many others, including doctors, prescription substances were okay. Street drugs and alcohol were not. Although we had fun always, Elvis seemed often keyed up, almost tense. He either sat in the characteristic ankle over the knee pose, his foot wiggling as he talked, or he roved around the room, pausing briefly to fiddle with various objects. Because he was trying to calcify his knuckles for his karate board style chopping, he often interrupted his monologue to bang his hand on a wooden table or another hard surface. That never failed to inspire another story about a master who destroyed various objects with a single karate chop. One night he told us about a guy who was so good he could slice the horn off of a charging bull. Now, whether or not that was true, Elvis vowed, "That's what I'm going to do. I want to be that good." The nightly group sings by the piano were Elvis's only vocal practice. One night, after yet another rendition of Mona Lisa, Elvis worked himself up into another fury over not being able to record that song. He struck the piano keys with increasing force, his eyes turning to slits and his face growing redder and redder. Then he flung an ashtray against the wall. It was one of the few times in the early days that I witnessed the volatile Presley temper. A sudden storm that usually cleared as quickly as it came on. "It was too effing late," he muttered as he sat down and recommenced banging away at the piano keys. "And this is my kind of music." Aside from playing the piano and singing during our nightly bull sessions, Elvis didn't perform before an audience during his entire 2 years in the Army. There was one notable exception I'll never forget, though. Christmas, 1959. Elvis decided to invite me and a small group of regulars to a special Christmas party held in a small but pleasant social room in a building that the Army rented in Bad Nauheim for special forces, whose dependents resided off base. The star of the first part of the show was Charlie Hodge. Now, Charlie played the piano and guitar and sang, occasionally getting one or two of us to join in. Elvis sat with me and a few others at a table, thoroughly enjoying Charlie's performance and urging him on with comments like, "Hey, Charlie, do the one about Santa hanging his balls on the Christmas tree." Then Elvis stepped on stage to join him. They jammed together on gospel duets and whatever else they felt like singing. It was the first time I'd seen Elvis perform on a stage, and he was truly magnificent. Everyone, on stage and off, was having a great time. Well, Charlie and Elvis finished their performance, and someone put a stack of 45s on a turntable. A few guys and girls started to dance. I rarely saw Elvis dance off stage in all the years I knew him, but that night he put in a few hours on the dance floor, slow dancing and jitterbugging. Here we go with Joe again. getting in a dig at Elvis. That's what I see some of the stuff in here. I see some cool stuff that I'm enjoying reading, but I'm seeing some digs that I don't like. I was surprised to notice that Elvis's jitterbug style was rather clumsy. On stage, his legs, feet, arms, and head all moved in time with the music. But when he danced with the girl, Elvis seemed to lose touch with the rhythm. Not that his dance partners cared a bit. They were dancing with Elvis. Basically, Joe was saying he's a bad dancer. Right here. This guy, Joe Esposito, says Elvis is a bad dancer. I bet Joe was probably a bad dancer. The highlight of the party was a surprise distribution of gifts from Elvis. The guys each received a beautiful personally engraved Ronson butane lighter, the Veriflame model, which still looks sharp today, even after 30 years. Most of us smoked at the time, so it was the perfect gift. Mine read, "To Joe, from Elvis, Christmas, 1959. The party was such a success that we arranged to hold Elvis's birthday party in the same room a few weeks later on January 8, 1960. Charlie began the show again, and after a little while, Elvis joined in. We hadn't known what to give the guy who had everything, but we finally gambled that a trophy recognizing his skill at football might be the perfect gift. About 10 of us pooled our money together for a total of $35 spent on a birthday present for the most famous person in the world. We bought a trophy, had it engraved, and I was elected to present the gift. I performed my duty with a bit of fanfare, but it was a risk. If he didn't like the idea of a trophy, putting him on the spot would make a bad situation worse. Well, I gambled and called for everyone's attention as Elvis came forward to accept the gift. On behalf of the Bad Nauheim Sunday Afternoon Football Association, I'd like to present you with this trophy as the most valuable player. Elvis read the inscription aloud. Elvis Presley, most valuable player, Bad Nauheim Sunday Afternoon Football Association, 1959. Elvis beamed a huge smile. The group broke into loud applause. Man, I couldn't be any happier with any gift, Elvis said. He was so carried away by the spirit of the occasion that he made an impromptu acceptance speech ending with, even if you have to give me a new Cadillac someday, you couldn't make me happier than I am now. He held the trophy high like an Academy Award winner. There's going to get a special place in my trophy room at Graceland, he promised. Not long after his birthday party, Elvis went on maneuvers. See, those are the field trips, where soldiers slept outdoors and played army games. Of course, as clerks, George and I seldom went. A few days after we left, we heard that Elvis had been hospitalized. Now, apparently, it had rained heavily the night before and there had been a strong wind. Elvis had pulled his poncho over his head because he was in an open Jeep, but he had kept the Jeep running and was overcome by carbon monoxide. He'd passed out, then slumped over he slumped over and fallen out of the Jeep into a pool of dirty water. Luckily, a gust of wind had blown the poncho off his head, and he was revived. He came down with a severe sore throat, and the army doctors were concerned about the possibilities of bronchitis, carbon monoxide poisoning, and damage to his voice. Elvis was very prone to tonsillitis, so they talked about removing his tonsils. Nobody wanted to take responsibility for possibly damaging Elvis's priceless singing voice, so it was never done. As soon as we got the news, George and I rushed to the hospital. Outside the room, the atmosphere was funereal. Everyone was serious and somber, warning us to visit for only 1 minute because Elvis was very weak and others wanted to see him. Fearing the worst, we opened the door gingerly. Elvis was propped up on a nest of pillows, smiling and perky. Pretty nurses swarmed around his bedside, giving him massages and ministering to his every need. The impression I got was that he wanted to shorten our visit, not for the sake of his health, but to allow for more time with those nurses. For the 3 or 4 days he was in the hospital, he actually had affairs with nurses in his room. He never explicitly said so, but the expressions on his and the nurses' happy faces spoke volumes. Maybe, maybe not. Like a lot of y'all say, Elvis got a lot of credit for doing a lot of things with a lot of people that he probably didn't do. But he was young. And when you're young, you're not married, you're probably going to have more more relationships. All right. Aside from the nurses, there were two other primary sources of women for Elvis. One was the visitors who, by prior arrangement, joined the group. Either the guys brought them to meet Elvis, or they were picked up at the local beer gardens. Then there were the 30 to 100 people, mostly women, always outside of Elvis's gate. I remember a pair of beautiful blonde sisters who came over from England and rented a room in the house next door just to be near Elvis. It wasn't long before they were plucked from the crowd. That night around 10 o'clock, Elvis faked a yawn with a devilish expression. I guess I'll hit the sack, he announced. I got a big day tomorrow. Then he disappeared. The sisters knew by prior eye contact that they were the chosen ones, so they followed him into the bedroom. On occasions, if the girl didn't get the message, Red said something like, Elvis wants to see you for a second. But those sisters definitely got the message. Man, it's crazy, Elvis said the next day, but he never revealed what went on in there. Elvis rarely went into the details about his romantic life. It must have been great for you as a single guy to have all these fantastic girls available, guys have said to me over the years, but in the Army days at least, it wasn't. As I read the social interactions among Elvis and the girls, and the Memphis buddies, this was a lose-lose situation for the guys. Elvis said he would never go after a girl who liked someone else because it was unfair competition. Well, what girl would choose Joe Esposito if she could be with Elvis Presley? If a girl seemed to like one of his friends or vice versa, Elvis ruled her out of that night's competition, and she realized pretty quickly that she was out of the running for Elvis. She couldn't stay, but she wasn't going to be Elvis's girl, so the girls usually remained aloof towards us. It was okay. There were many other ways to find girls in Germany, says Joe. Though he wasn't too pleased about it, Elvis also attracted men. A so-called holistic doctor from South Africa named Monsignor Lawrence, whom he referred to by the considerably less grand Larry, came to the house regularly to give Elvis massages, facials, and nutritional supplements. One day he tried to seduce Elvis. Failing, he threatened to go to the media with a story that he and Elvis had had an affair. We later discovered that Larry had thought that this would be a good way to raise money for his hair transplant operation. No one knew what to do, so Lamar called the colonel in the States at 2 o'clock in the morning, and Elvis got on the line to ask the colonel to take care of the situation. I don't know how, but the colonel squashed the sleazy blackmail attempt. I'm sure they got the army to reach out to this guy. At heart, Elvis was an innocent, overprotected by his mother, labeled strange by his peers because of his long hair and weird clothing. He was suddenly transformed at an age 19 into an international superstar and a fabulously wealthy man. In an instant, it seemed, he became an object of passion for millions of women, and a figure of envy for an equal number of men. Now, money was for spending, and women were for getting. This was never more apparent to me than during a trip that Elvis, Lamar, Cliff Gleaves, Jurgen, who was Elvis's karate instructor, and I took to Paris right after his birthday in 1960. Ostensibly, so Elvis could study karate with a renowned Korean instructor named Murakami Tetsuji, who taught at Paris's club Yosekan. The first time I assumed the role of organizers in Elvis's life was just before that leave for Paris. We were about to leave for the train when Elvis couldn't find his military identification card. He couldn't cross the border without it, so I raced over to the office where I worked, typed out a fake card, and signed the commanding officer's name. As we walked out the door, his father handed all the money to me and asked me to keep account of our expenses. So I paid all the bills in Paris, hotels, restaurants, and shows. When we got back to Germany, I turned over all the receipts to Vernon. He was thrilled to death. He finally got receipts for his money the first time ever. Well, that That would probably be the main reason why, besides, probably the only reason why Vernon chose Joe to be part of the Memphis Mafia, to be part of Elvis's business, because of that. Um, in Miami Days with Elvis, the book by Johnny Lang, it looked like Elvis wanted to bring Johnny over as part of the group, but Johnny didn't play ball. He kind of talked back to Vernon, didn't like how Vernon treated Lamar and a few other people. Got to play ball, right? And Johnny, I must not have wanted to. We had a private compartment on the train, and when we arrived at the station in Paris, we spotted two generals hailing a cab. Now, barely concealing our laughter, we saluted them as we, a bunch of draftees, climbed into a limousine and drove through the streets of Paris to the Hotel de Gaulle. Here I was, a 22-year-old, high school dropout who'd never been out of Chicago until the Army took me out. Luxury in a magnificent suite of rooms on the top floor of the finest hotel in Paris. Order anything you want, boys. Just flashing that crooked grin and executing a grand sweep of his arm. Just order anything you want. That's going to take us to the end of the reading. Enjoy. Thank you so much for being part of this channel. I can't thank y'all enough. Thank you for the super thanks when y'all leave them. They help me. Yeah, we'll keep reading, okay? And we'll keep this journey up. Have a great day. TCB, TLC. This is Rare Photos.